Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today what I want to talk about is a little bit more about my writing process that I go through. Mainly with how much preparation that goes into writing my books and my stories. When a writer sits down at the keyboard to actually write, start putting words on a page, there's a spectrum in how much preparation goes into that. And at one end of the spectrum is the what we call plotters, and at the other end are pantsers. Uh, Plotters are people who sit down, they plot out their story. They have little note cards, they have a sheet that they fill out. Sometimes they do long character studies and descriptions. Sometimes they do a lot of research and that sort of thing. And so when they actually sit down at the keyboard, they may have spent, weeks, months, years actually working out every aspect of the story. These are folks who can tell you on page 27 what's going to happen. They can tell you who dies in chapter 4 and when they find out, when the characters find out in which chapter who did it, and that sort of thing. They can tell you pretty much everything about that sort of thing. And that's sort of like at the extreme end. Um, and then the other end of the spectrum are the pantsers. And they call them pantsers because they are riding by the seat of their pants, meaning they have no preparation. And again, there's extreme versions of where people literally will just sit down at the keyboard and just start typing. And whatever word pops in their head, that's the next word that gets typed into their little computer. Um, I am much more on the pantser side of things. I enjoy it. I kind of discovered it by accident. When I first decided I was going to write a novel, my first novel, Saga the Scout, I looked all over online, read all these books, uh, learning about how to write a novel, what you got to do to write a novel. And I found lots and lots of information on plotting, all these different ways of plotting. Dan Harmon's story circle, Joseph Campbell's heroic myth circle, Lester Dent's master plot formula, the 3-act structure, which I think someone even broke down to like a 9-act structure. There's all sorts of other plotting devices, and so first I was just trying to figure out which one was I supposed to use, which is the right one for me. And I'd say I spent a good like 2 months doing nothing but looking at what is what goes into plotting. I think I eventually settled on Dan Harmon's story circles, so I had like even like a little chart made out, and I was trying to fill in all the little details of like, okay, well, this is about the character and what happens to them and what happens next and all these. And I was trying to fill all this stuff out, and I was never happy with it. Never really liked it. And I was always afraid I was going to do it wrong. It's that sort of, oh, well, if I put this in my outline, then I have to write it because then I'm not doing it right. And it just never clicked with me. And I eventually got frustrated because I felt like I was spending all this time outlining but not really writing, which was exactly what was going on. I was spent 2 months doing nothing but outlining. And so it finally hit me like, I just want to write something. Because I know that there's all these aspects to writing. There's dialogue and there's pacing and there's how to describe things. And then there's, just describing out, action scenes and that sort of stuff. And I was getting no experience doing that. And so I was like, I'm just going to write a short story. And I'm not even going to like really care that much about it. I just want to write something just to get that experience. It took all the pressure off of myself. And so I sat down, and I think I just sort of like invented a character that I wanted to be like Conan the Barbarian, but more smart. Whereas Conan the Barbarian's not really stupid, but he was more about, you know, punching people and breaking into things and killing monsters and getting the beautiful women and that sort of thing. And what I wanted was more like an investigator. And I invented JAREK the Scholar, which became another series of short stories. But at the time, I really had nothing in mind. I had like he was more like an Indiana Jones character, and I think I eventually kind of started to formulate he's Indiana Jones in a Philip Marlowe kind of vein in a Conan the Barbarian world. And all I had in mind was this character that I now had sort of an image in my head about was waiting for something to happen. He was someplace waiting for something to happen. And then that drove the question of like, well, where is he? What is he waiting for? Why is he waiting for him? And that question became an answer, which became another question, which became another answer. And before you knew it, I was writing a story. And it was great. It was a lot of fun. And I had no idea where this was going to go. When I sat down and wrote the first paragraph of Desert Nightshade, which is the first story in the Adventures of Yark yarn, um, I had no idea how it was going to end up. It just kind of just kept going. And as I was writing, I would start, looking a little further down the horizon. I would start to, this question would bring up this answer, and that answer would kind of like, oh, now I kind of want this to happen later on. And so even though I didn't have any idea what I was doing in the very beginning, the story started to take shape over time, and I had more fun writing that story. I think I immediately just wrote the next one as well once I kind of was finished with that one. And once I did that, over time, I was still like reading books and listening to audiobooks on how to write a novel. I think I came across Michael L. Ron's book on like how to write your first novel. I think that's what it's called. Um, and in there, he talked about writing a novel without outline, and that was just shocking to me because no one else had talked about that. Everyone else talked about how you needed an outline and this is the right kind of outline to use. And he was the first person to say, man, you can kind of go without an outline. And I think it turns out, I think he writes without an outline as well. I think he's written like 50 books or something like that. And he's got a big YouTube channel, and so it's working for him. And in that book, he was describing another book that he had read called Writing into the Dark by Dean Wesley Smith. And Dean Wesley Smith is a big proponent of like just writing without an outline, using your creative voice, trusting in your subconscious mind that it knows stories and it knows character development. If you just kind of get out of its way, it'll write a much more interesting story for you than you could ever do sitting down outlining. And I definitely experienced that. In everything that I've written without an outline, there's been a point in which some inspiration hits, an idea comes, a question is asked, and an answer comes that I never could have come up with if I just sort of sat down with a bunch of index cards trying to write out exactly how things are going to happen well in advance. It is a much more intuitive style of writing, and if you go with that and you trust that, then you get a much better output, you get a much better story out of it. And one of the things that Dean Wesley Smith talks about is that writing into the dark works because you are mimicking how readers read. Right? Writers who write into the dark are mimicking how readers read, meaning that when a reader sits down to read a book, they don't really know how things are going to go either. Most readers, when they read a book, they read the blurb of the book. They probably do the little look inside. They might read the first chapter, however much Amazon is showing them. Some people in a bookstore will even flip to the end just to kind of get an idea. Is this a happy ending? Is this a sad ending? Is it a cliffhanger? But other than that, most readers, when they pick up a book, they don't know what's coming next. And that's kind of the fun of reading. I think that's one of the reasons why mysteries and thrillers are so popular, is because that's kind of the game, right? You're reading it, but you want to see if you can figure out what happened before the the author tells you what happened. Can you sort of suss things out? And that's the reason why we watch mysteries and thrillers and movies and stuff. And so when you're writing into the dark, I don't know what's going to happen either, and so I am going through the same process that my readers are going through. Now I have the benefit of I'm actually writing this, and so if in chapter 17 I say I want this to happen because that idea comes up and I really like it, but I realize I have done no setup to that, well then I get to go backwards in time and change that sort of thing. If I realize, oh, what I really want to happen here is the character pulls out a gun and shoots somebody, well I need to make sure that character had a gun in the first place, and sometimes I might have to like do a whole bunch of rewrites to explain how he got that gun, where it is. I need to remind the reader a little bit of like, oh yeah, this character has a gun, so that way when I whip that out in chapter 17 or whatever, it doesn't feel like I just pulled out of thin air. It's kind of like, oh no, yeah, that was there. I forgot about that. That's where like a lot of stories kind of get derailed, is that they give they give a character a superpower that they have not alluded to whatsoever, and that feels like cheating, and a lot of readers pick up on that. It feels like cheating, that, oh yeah, there's no way I as the reader could have anticipated that, and so that's kind of like the wrong kind of surprise. But and it, like I said, just makes writing a lot more fun. If you bought a book and at the very beginning of the book was an outline that told you everything that happens in that book, what happens in each chapter, who dies at what point, what clues are left behind, and who did the murder at the very end, you probably wouldn't read that book. And we know this because this happens a lot with movies, as movie trailers will sometimes give away too much of the story, and so when you watch the trailer, you don't really feel inspired to go see the movie because you kind of know how this is going to go. I see a lot of horror movies that are kind of like that. I kind of already know who the killer is because you just sort of told me. Um, it's those movies that the trailer does a good job of teasing us what's going on, but you're not really sure what's going to happen. That's where it's a much more fun ride. And so I think with writing it needs to be that way too. Whether you're writing, whether you're the reader or the writer, it's more fun to kind of not know what's coming up as well. And so I don't plot anymore. Different pantsers have different amount of preparation they need. According to Dean Wesley Smith, all he needs is a title. He will, if he has a title, he will start with a character someplace doing something, and then he will just kind of run with it, which is kind of like how I wrote Desert Nightshade. At the time, I didn't have a title because I didn't know Desert Nightshade was going to even be in the book. But I knew I had a character, and I knew where he was going to be, and I knew he was going to be waiting for somebody, and then I just went off on that tangent. Stephen King is actually probably the most famous pantser out there. His way of writing is he wants to have a good in-depth knowledge of characters, and not so much like how tall are they, what color hair their eye, what color hair they have, or when their birthday was, or anything else like that. But more like their motivations and their histories and where they come from. And so he wants to have that with like his main characters, and then he wants to put them in an interesting setting, and he kind of has like an idea of what he wants that setting to be, and then he just sort of writes and sees what happens. The Shining, for instance, it was a failed writer with an alcohol and anger problem, a sort of mousy, weak-willed mother, and then a young boy with psychic powers. And you take that family and you stick them in isolation, winter isolation, in a haunted hotel, and you just sort of see where that goes. That was basically The Shining, and from start to finish, he didn't really necessarily know where that was going to go. And that means we as the readers don't really know where that's going to go too. There are some weaknesses to pantsing. There is a possibility that you're going to end up going down a rabbit hole that ends and that doesn't really go anywhere. Like in my book, in Saga the Scout, I had in mind that there's a point in which Ethan, my main character, goes to Cabela's, which is a big sporting goods store, and he meets some people there. And when I first started reading that, I had him continue on to Austin, because that's the whole goal, is he's trying to get back to Austin to get to his mother. And so I wrote, I would say, like 5,000 words. There's a few chapters of him traveling to Austin, what he sees there, what he experiences there, and it just never really clicked with me. I realized this was kind of boring. It was boring for me to write, and I was pretty sure it was going to be boring for my readers. I realized that I needed to have him make a bigger turn in a different direction. So I just threw out all those words. That was probably like a good couple weeks worth of work there. Just threw them all out and deleted them. One of the deleted scenes I've kept and I put on my website. So if you want to read that, you can sign up for our website. The link will be in the below. But then I decided, yeah, I just need to have him go off in a different direction. And I think that's one of the dangers to being a pantser, is that you sometimes will write stuff that will never get used because you'll realize, I need to go down this tangent. Oh, wait, no, that was bad. I need to go back that way. Theoretically, outliners, plotters don't have that problem because they have an outline that has kind of told them, this is the path that I'm going to go. The problem is every plotter that I know ends up having to revise their outline, sometimes multiple times, and sometimes like with huge revisions, which to me kind of says, why bother spending that time writing an outline in the first place? If you know you're going to get a quarter of the way through the book and you're going to have to throw out the outline that you wrote and make a new outline, well, just stop writing with an outline. Just trust yourself and write in the process. Let it go, let it flow. But anyway, that's about what I wanted to talk about today with the whole notion of like writing processes and how people go into it. I want to start talking about the Enneagram. I think I mentioned that last time, but using how to use the Enneagram as like ways to develop characters or start to get an in-depth view of characters without necessarily writing out like a whole character study or character sketch. But anyway, I'm going to put a link to my in the description for my books and some of these other things that I alluded to today, the other books and resources. And I will talk to you next time. Bye.